people who are going to be a little late. They're coming from Boston.
Okay.
Some are just joining us online, so I'm keeping an eye out for them. But we're just going to start right now for the people who are here. This is going to be recorded, so anyone who wants to watch it later, we have an MBTA zoning dedicated page on the Planning and Zoning website now, so all the materials will be uploaded there, as long as this as well with this presentation. So I believe that we might have to open the meeting tonight for those boards who have a quorum. So we have the select board, full select board in attendance. We have some planning board, zoning board. We have the chair, and we have some members from the Affordable Housing Trust. So for those members who do have a quorum, I think we can proceed and open the meeting, and then I can give you a brief introduction before we continue. And just so everyone knows, people who will be asking questions tonight or have for the Q&A section or the feedback section of the workshop, you might have to come up here for the owl in order for it to catch your voice, and then we can take very accurate meeting minutes. So I know it's a bit of a hassle, but I appreciate the flexibility as we try to make it work for the best of both worlds. So thank you. Yes.
Good. Open up the meeting.
Yeah, open up the select board meeting.
Well, all right, I'll declare the selectmen meeting open, and just for point of order, note that there are more selectmen here than anybody else.
Smallest board.
And we still outnumber your board.
We don't have a quorum.
No
We
quorum.
claim Ann too, we've got four.
Affordable Housing Trust ends.
Oh,
Ooh,
So if we have for the boards that don't have a quorum, Jack, you can get it started. Just say that.
yeah, the zoning board of appeals does not have a quorum.
The planning board does not have a quorum. Affordable Housing Trust? We do not have a quorum. No.
One short.
One short, yes.
Okay. And I still don't have anyone like. Perfect. So we can get started. I'm sure that you guys have read my many emails on this, but
Okay,
hi,
wait.
how are you?
Now we have a quorum.
Awesome.
Sorry.
No worries.
Get out of work.
We were embarrassed.
You used to be on the planning board?
Now you go.
Yes, now that we have a planning quorum.
Sorry.
So welcome to the quorum. And we just have to announce, we have to open the meeting just now.
Do I did, yeah.
Yep.
Open the planning board meeting, what's the date today? October 26th,
At 6:09 p.m.
6:09 p.m.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you. So we'll get started. As I'm sure you've read from my multiple emails, this is our consultant, Emily Inez. She's wonderful. She's going to facilitate the discussion tonight. She's going to give us an overview of everything that the law is. So why was it passed? What's in it? What are the requirements in general and Medfield specific? And we're also going to be discussing a little bit about the things that we have talked up to date, but we don't want to get too in the weeds. We just want to do like first impressions. What do you think? And just have everyone be on the same starting place, because I'm going to give you more updates as this initiative continues month by month. So you will be kept up to date on this, and there'll be plenty more opportunities to weigh in. This is just, workshop number 1. So don't get too overwhelmed. Emily, you want to take over?
So if you don't mind putting the presentation back up and
yeah.
sharing it, I will get started with introductions, starting with me. So my name is Emily Inez. As Maria said, I am an urban planner and designer, and I have been working with the MBTA Communities Act for quite some time. RKG Associates, Eric Halverson from RKG Associates is also part of the team, but he could not be here tonight, he's traveling. Together, we helped develop the compliance model along with Mass Housing Partnership and with HLC, formerly BHCD. I also helped develop the sample zoning. Eric helped them work out some of the economic feasibility analysis. So we've been diving into this for a long time. We've worked with many communities, both as early adopters, and then actually you all were one of the first communities that we worked with to test out the model and give a sense of where you might be for compliance. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to take you through, as Maria said, this idea of what the act is, what it is not, as a matter of fact, and try and get us all on the same page in terms of terminology and requirements. We've been doing this with town boards and committees, so that as we continue to move through the process, everybody understands the basis, the terminology, the types of things that we're going to be looking at. And then as we do a deep dive into each community, that community already has the tools they need to understand where they are. But before we get started on that, I would love to know who you are. And I know which committees you are all on, because I heard that, but I'd love to know names. I'll try and remember all of them. It might take me a couple of meetings, but maybe if you wouldn't mind going around and introducing yourself, that'd be terrific. Yeah.
I'm Gus Murphy from the Select Board.
Newton Thompson, Affordable Housing Trust.
Dan Thompson, no relation, affordable housing.
Yeah, Nicholas, Chair of the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Sarah, the planning board.
Set me in planning.
Jim Brand Planning Board.
Andrew Sullivan, president.
Mark Sullivan, resident.
Pete Peterson, Select Board, and I 30 in my other life.
Great.
Eileen Murphy, wear two hats, select board and affordable housing trust.
Excellent.
Christine Ferrara, town administrator.
Perfect. Thank you. And I know we had at least one person online, so hopefully I will meet Bill Belmacero. We see you. Hopefully we'll meet you in person at some point. So I'm going to get us started. We're going to talk about a little bit about where we are in terms of the process, and I'm going to introduce you to the community, MBTA Communities Act. Feel free to stop me with questions. It's a lot of material, and wait and hold your questions at the very end. You will probably have forgotten what your question is, so don't worry about interrupting me. And if you ask something that we're going to cover later in the presentation, I'll let you know, and then we'll talk a little bit about next steps. So we are here now in task 2. This is the MBTA session for boards. We're going to be starting work on drafting bylaws, figuring out comments, having community input. But we wanted to start you off with where we are now. And then there's this whole process of, as we look at the initial draft and what it might mean and its implications and changes and input from the public, review and revisions. But the goal is to get everything to town meeting on May 6th. So we will be back to the planning board for your public hearings. We will expect to hear from all of you during this process. It's a short timeline, and it's a short timeline for all of the communities. Many of the communities who have the December 2024 deadline are all going for a May town meeting, so that we have the possibility of a fall town meeting. So you're not alone in this. I think that's the first thing to understand. And I know that, yes.
And were you going to send the slides around to us?
Absolutely. Yes.
The slides have also been posted on our website. So if any residents other than people here are interested, you can direct them to the MBTA website. It's under the planning and zoning tab. I can help you find that if you need. Right.
So it's just, and we also understand that meeting times and things may shift, but we do know that getting to town meeting is a hard deadline. So you understand we have that as a priority for us. So let's talk a little bit about the MBTA Communities Act. It's also known as Section 3A, so you might hear both terms thrown about interchangeably. It is a new law, a relatively new law, and it established that each of the 177 cities and towns that make up the MBTA communities have to pass a zoning law that allows for multifamily use, at least one district. Has to be permitted as a right, can't be age restricted, must be suitable for families with children, must have a minimum gross density of 15 dwelling units per acre. And then for those communities that have a commuter rail, transit station, whatever, part of the district has to be located within a half mile. There is a purpose to this law. It's an important purpose, and that is that Massachusetts has a housing shortage, a huge housing shortage. We also have problems with affordability, that the housing that we do have is becoming less and less attainable for many people. And we are becoming at a disadvantage in terms of competition with other states for employees. There's actually some net migration going out of Massachusetts now because people can't afford to stay here. And that's a problem for us economically. And from a planner's perspective, placing housing near transit is good housing policy, it's good economic policy, and it's good climate policy. But really, that idea that the housing shortage is hurting our residents, our families, our employers, our employees is huge. It is not a lot of things. There's been a lot of misinformation in the press. It's not a mandate to actually build housing. This is zoning. We're going to talk a little bit more about the difference between zoning and production later on. It's also not a housing production target. Nobody is saying that you have been assigned this much housing and therefore you must produce this much housing. Talk about why that is as we go through. It's not restricted to affordable housing only. That's another common misperception, is that it's all about affordable housing. And while it is a tool in housing and a tool in affordable housing, there are other tools that are better for affordable housing, and we'll talk about a lot of those tools. It's also not the only tool for a community. It's certainly not a one size fits all, and I mentioned we'll talk about that. It's not viewed as optional by the Attorney General. I'll point to a letter that the Attorney General sent earlier this year later. So these are the 177 designated MBTA communities. For those of you who are thinking 175, which is what it was when these first came out, Fall River and New Bedford came online as MBTA communities, so they're now required to comply. Then these are how you know whether or not you are an MBTA community. I won't go into that. Medford is Medfield is an adjacent community. So you do have until December 31st, 2024. I was at a client the other day where somebody said we have until December 24, and they thought they meant the date December 24, and that person started panicking. So you have till the year 2024. And if you're a rapid transit community, which that community was, your deadline is this year, 2023. Commuter rail and adjacent are the same. And then if you're an adjacent small town, you're 2025. Adjacent communities don't have commuter rail in them. So rapid transit is subway, commuter rail, obvious, but adjacent communities and adjacent small towns don't actually have transit stations. This is a list of implications if the town does not comply. That's been a frequent question we've had. And I like to point to the to this side, to the right-hand side first, because although the list of grants is longer, I think the loss of the opportunity for a town to really consider how and what its housing needs are and how those housing needs can be met is critically important. And the MBTA Communities Act, because it is a requirement, provides a framework to communities to have those conversations. In some communities, those conversations have been happening for a while. In other communities, those conversations are long delayed. And they're not easy conversations to have. There's a lot that gets wrapped up into housing, but it's a critical conversation. And so when a town talks about its housing needs, it can talk about the affordable housing needs that it has. They can talk about the diversification of housing. What I mean by that is some communities have a lot of housing of one type, typically in this area, a lot of single family in Eastern Massachusetts, a lot of single family houses, less so on other types of housing. And that other type of housing can be really important for people throughout their life cycle. So if you're a young person who's coming out of college or coming out of high school and in their first job, you're not going to be able to afford a single family home. If you're an older person and you want to downsize, maybe you've had kids and they've gone to college, maybe you just don't want to handle a large house anymore. Those seniors are prevented from downsizing within their communities if they don't have the housing types they need. So allowing a community to talk about that is really important. You raise your hand.
Yes, I just wanted to jump in with a fun fact from the master plan. The houses in Medfield, 60% of them have 8 bedrooms or more. So they're very large houses for very large prices. So the issue we have is when it's really hard to find a house with 2 or 3 bedrooms here in Medfield.
It really is.
Yeah. So if you're elderly or if you're a small family or just a married couple with no children, it is hard to find a house that matches your needs here in Medfield. And the standard for affordability that we have, the state defines it as whatever you make or your household makes a year, so that you and your spouse and any adult children, that amount of money times 3 is the amount of housing that you can afford. I think the average income in Medfield is roughly 130,000 per household. And the average home price is roughly, I think, 750,000. So even Medfield residents cannot currently afford Medfield homes by those standards. So you're looking at 5 to even 10 times more than what people are making is the type of housing currently available. So while this is not, it's not an affordable housing incentive, just creating more market rate housing will take some of the pressure off. Those affordable housing apartments will allow people to, if you can afford better, you typically will live in better. So it'll help everyone, especially workforce or regular residents, just find something that actually matches their lifestyle.
And that's exactly the type of, that's what we mean by that housing diversification. It's different types of housing, it's different styles of housing. It's important for a healthy community to have that, again, from a planning perspective. So that's the opportunity side. That's the, let's talk about what housing needs there are. I'm working with a community where they've got a large employer coming in, and the employer is worried about the fact that the community might not have enough housing for their new employees coming in here. So housing is very much a part of economic development. We talk about whether or not the people who work in town can actually live in the town that they can work in, and that's becoming increasingly less so. And that conversation has been held about town employees, teachers, fire, police, et cetera. But it's also true about the people who maybe run small businesses in a town, staff those small businesses. A lot of restaurants, for example, have had trouble finding staffing. Those are people that we enjoy going to restaurants. We think it's part of the vitality of the town to have something like that. But if the people who work there can't live in the town, that makes it difficult. So that's the diversification. That's the economic development argument. There are some sticks, and there's two really key sticks. One of them is the loss of access to grant funds. So the top three funds there, Housing Choice, Local Capital Projects, and the MassWorks Infrastructure Program, those are specifically listed in the legislation that cities and towns that don't comply can't have access to them. HLC just added another 13 grant programs to that list. So if you're not in compliance, you can't get those funds. And then finally, I mentioned the Attorney General. They had sent out advisory guidance in March 2023 that stated essentially all MBTA communities must comply with the law. There are fair housing issues if you don't comply. And in fact, there is a town where the leadership of the town has stated categorically that we don't intend to comply, and they have been sued by a third-party group under fair housing regulations for non-compliance. So I mentioned that MBTA communities is a tool, but it's not the tool. In other words, addressing MBTA communities is not going to solve everything that a community might need to solve. And so my colleague Erica developed this slide to talk about the different types of housing programs that are out there. Obviously, not every community needs all of these, but there are specific housing programs for the unsheltered, for people with extremely low or low income. Where MBTA communities or 3A comes in is in the moderate income of the workforce, and into MBTA Communities Act is primarily about market rate housing with some affordability components. And we'll talk about that affordability component.
Sorry, we do have a question in the Q&A. For loss of access to grant funds, is it the town that would be ineligible to apply, but a nonprofit located in the town could still apply?
That is a really good question. I will double check it. I believe it's the town can't apply, but I don't know that for sure. So Jean, we'll check on that for you. Great question.
Sorry, I am stuck on this menu now.
That's all right. I wonder if nope, you are stuck on the menu. Okay, there we go.
There we go.
So the other thing that I wanted to note is that, hang on, if you can just re-tap on this. I love using one screen for these. So the other thing is I mentioned that zoning is not housing production. We'll talk some more about what zoning is, but there are other factors besides zoning that come into play when you're trying to produce housing. And certainly some of the communities I'm working with do in fact want to produce housing. And so this is of critical importance to them. Just because you zone something does not mean that you're going to get housing. So it's a strength of the market in the community. Financial feasibility, which is huge at the moment because interest rates have risen over 3 times. So projects that might have been financially feasible a few years ago aren't necessarily financially feasible now. Developable sites, the community actually has to have sites that can be developed and that the seller is willing to sell to somebody to be developed. Not always the same thing. Available labor is a critical one at the moment. There have to be enough people who are actually going to build the housing. And interestingly enough, they have to have somewhere to live as well, too. So, you know, whether or not we can get people to build them, and whether or not the community is a desirable place to live. And I would add to that, whether or not the community has signaled that they're interested in having developed for the communities that are trying to produce housing, that are trying to meet certain needs, the friendliness of the streamlined permitting process in the community is an important factor.
I'm curious, is there a look back period? And I say that when I think of like Walpole, they've done so much right around their train station, but yet this came up, I'm sure, after all those permits were pulled, it was under development. So are communities getting a grace where they did do the right things in the last 3, 4, 5 years?
Excellent question. No. And the reason is because it's zoning, not actual production, that the state is asking for. So we'll talk a little bit more about how zoning sees what's already there. So keep that in mind, but that is a very good question. And one that has been somewhat, I love these slippy scarves, don't you? They just escape. It's been a question of concern for many communities. So remind me, but we will address that. So in other words, there have been communities that say, oh, we have to produce 6,000 houses or 6,000 dwelling units rather under this law. We're going to pass this. The 6,000 are going to appear overnight. We're very concerned. These things all come into play. So you're not going to get instantaneous housing under this law. You'll be zoned for it, but it doesn't mean it's going to appear immediately. All right. We're about to plunge into the higher level parts of the compliance model. I'm going to walk you through the process of doing the compliance model, the different things that we're looking at as tests, and how this has an implication for you. So the compliance model is based on 2 components. One is a GIS, or Geographic Information Systems component, looks at the geography of the area, and one is an Excel-based component that pulls information, unfortunately hand-entered, but pulls information from your existing zoning, applies it to the geography, and calculates the number of units to understand whether or not you're going to meet the requirements. I'll go through sort of the implications of each of these, but just know that in addition to telling you whether or not you comply, the model can also be used to test different scenarios. And that's true of testing both the geography. In other words, you can come up with different areas to test, but also different dimensional standards and other requirements. So for example, if you're looking at an area and it's very close to compliance and you say, what if we allowed 3.5 stories instead of 3, or 4 stories into 3? The model would allow you to test that and see if it makes a difference. So it's kind of it's an iterative process at understanding compliance. So basically what we do is we download the model, the land database, which the state has produced. So all communities are pulling from the same data. So you won't have one community say, well, I pulled from this, and another community saying I pulled from that. They created the database that we pull. We bring that information into GIS. We pull the parcel information that we're going to test. We then apply it to the model, add the zoning, spit it out, say, okay, we are in compliance, we're not in compliance. If we're not in compliance, we then do the iteration. So there's 3 things that we're looking for, 3 tests. One is the land area. Where is it? How big is it? Whether or not it's adjacent for transit, that's not something that you have to worry about because you're an adjacent community, and whether or not there's excluded land. And we'll talk a little bit about excluded land. Capacity, that's the number of units. When we talk about capacity, unit capacity, that's the number of dwelling units that can be produced. Density is the dwelling units per acre. So density is where the land area and the capacity start to interact. Transit adjacency again. And then zoning is the third. And that's all of the things that you see up here, all the things that's in traditional zoning, uses, lot size, dimension, parking, open space, and the density restrictions that you might have. These are components that go into the model itself. And they all work together. So if you change one, it's going to have an impact on the other pieces that you do. So if you change your land area, it's going to have an impact on the unit capacity that's developed. If you change some of the zoning parameters, that will also have an impact on the capacity. So we're going to review each test in turn. So these are your requirements. You have a minimum land area of 50 acres. Don't have to locate anything in a station area. And you have a minimum contiguous district size of 25 acres. And you see an asterisk there. And what that's reminding me to tell you is that if you end up with a larger land area, let's just say you do 60 acres for the sake of an argument, because you don't have to do just your minimum contiguous district size will be 30 instead of 25. In other words, we put 25 there because we're basing it off the minimum land area. But if you go for a larger district, your minimum size is half of your larger district. So there's some layers of math that we, the consultants, have to keep in mind as we're advising you, and that's one of them. So in terms of district location, that's really about where it is in relation to the station area from the compliance. Yes, go ahead.
That last point, I just want to make sure I understand. I
Yes,
think what you said is whatever your land area is, 50% of it has to be contiguous.
Exactly. Yeah. I was like, when people repeat back what I said, I think that's good.
I just want to make sure I understood.
Yep, that's excellent. So district location in a community that has a transit station is related to the station area. I would also add that it's important for communities that don't, because where you put it will have impacts on what you're trying to support. For example, if you're supporting a downtown, as some communities are, they may be putting the housing in or near the downtown. Others don't want it in a commercial area, but for the purposes of a model, of the model, district location refers to the station area. District size and contiguity of district, we've already talked about on that. But we haven't talked about what contiguity is. And so these diagrams explain when you're drawing the boundaries, how to think about contiguity. So areas have to share at least one parcel boundary. So you see our blue blob there is a contiguous district. All the parcels are together. There are a couple of parcels that are across the street. That is allowed. You can do that. We had one where we had a 5-way intersection come in, and because it's all across the street, that's contiguous if you cross the intersection. If you have areas with different zoning rules that are adjacent to each other, they're still contiguous. I'll have a picture of that on the next slide, but just anticipate that some districts are allowed. When you're drawing it, yes.
What's, from the standpoint of this concept,
Yes.
what's wrong with the lower right one?
I was just getting to that. They're basically, the person who drew this as an example basically just ran down the middle of the street to try and connect.
No, I know what's administratively wrong. I mean, conceptually, what's wrong with two pieces like that are zoned? What is the inherent problem with that? I would understand 50 single acres.
Right,
shotgun,
exactly.
but what's actually wrong with that?
So if you didn't have that connecting line, the way that was done, right? If you just take out that connecting line and say, these are two separate districts, they're both over 5 acres, nothing wrong with that whatsoever. It just doesn't count as your contiguous parcel.
And the reason that there is that requirement for the contiguous parcel is what?
My understanding, because I don't, that's part of the guidelines that HLC is that they wanted to make sure that there was at least one, it goes into the reasonable size requirement of the legislation. How they define reasonable size is that there would be half of your total requirement would be a contiguous area.
I again understand the administrative answer there. I don't understand the conceptual reason why that matters. And you may not either.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say we're beyond that. That's what they told us was going to be the reasonable size. So, I will say further that I've heard anecdotally is that they wanted people to be able to zone for full neighborhoods, and that's what they were thinking of. Is that this would feel more like these are actually awfully small parcels to be doing this, but just go with it. Those are very large parcels or something that would feel more like a full neighborhood than something that is disjointed like that. So I'm going to go to the next examples that might also help some. But that's my understanding. So, however, don't quote me on that because that was anecdotal. I have no official information on that. So a couple of other things. There are some communities that will have split parcels where they have split zoning. One half of the parcel or 1/3 of the parcel is in one zone and one is the other. You can't do that for this. For the compliance model, all the parcels have to be fully within the boundary. You can't you can't therefore create split parcels or include partial parcels in a district. If you have sub-districts, so this is what I meant before, this is one big district with sub-districts in it. And that can be really valuable for communities that don't want to have the same density requirements across all their districts. So they may, for example, say, hey, look, we'd like to have, say that's a blue area, we'd like to have that be a little bit denser and we'd like the sub areas to feather out into the neighborhood. Alternatively, they could be saying, look, that sort of sea green is along the street. We'd like that to be higher density, but we'd like it to step down into the neighborhoods. So if you have a sub-district system, you can be more sort of creative in tailoring the zoning to meet your needs. The key is that all of your districts together average out to the 15 dwelling units per acre. So you still have to meet the geographic requirements of the land area, but each sub-district doesn't have to be 15 dwelling units per acre. They just have to average down. The other thing is, I mentioned something called excluded land. So there's two types of land, or three types of land. There's just your regular land, right? That's where there's no sort of restriction on it. Excluded land is land that cannot be modeled for unit capacity. In other words, there's a zero capacity on that. And it affects your overall density per acre because it's going to bring it down if it's in your district. I've got a definition later on of excluded land. Just know for the purposes of the geography that we're talking about now that you can't deliberately draw your district to exclude the public land. In other words, that public land has to be within that blue district. You can't just draw it out and say, yeah, that's not included. You can, however, use public land for your contiguity requirements. So if you sort of flip that image in your head and said, we're not excluding the public land, we're connecting those two sides of public land, that is absolutely allowed. Just know it's going to affect your density when you do that. It's going to bring it down.
Really?
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
no, this is
I'm just trying to figure out the algorithms here. So the one with the public land.
yes.
Well, for a second, let's assume that's a park. So there's a good reason
Yes.
why everybody would love that. Is the acreage of the district that entire quadrilateral, including the acreage of public land?
It would
But
have,
the average, so you could have that as part of the district,
absolutely.
counting as part of the acreage, as long as the density of everything that was left was enough to get you to 15.
Exactly, 100%. Yeah.
Okay.
But some communities might want to draw it around it and say, hey, we don't want our density to have to go up, so we're gonna go around that.
Got it.
Yeah. There are better ways of drawing a district. So these are some very, very simplified examples. So this is where we get, just to recap, we're looking for 50 acres of land when we do the test and work with you. We're looking for the contiguous district of 25 acres or 50%. We're going to check that if you have any non-contiguous districts, that they're at least 5 acres. So you can have one big one and lots of small ones, for example, and that you've drawn the districts appropriately. Any other questions on land? All right, unit capacity. So unit capacity is 750 units. We had a simpler explanation in the calculation, but it was a little misleading, so we took it out. So it's based on your unit housing count and that there are minimums and caps, but yours is 750 units. Your minimum density requirement, as you know, is 15 dwelling units per acre. And you don't have to worry about the station area. And that's just a recognition that the unit capacity is not a housing production target. It's really a way of measuring that the size of the district is meeting with the requirements. In other words, Section 3A is really short, and HLC had to come up with a way of creating standards and guidelines to actually allow for Section A to be become into regulatory effect. And this is how they've done it, the land area and the unit capacity.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
I think on an earlier slide, the minimum land area was the lesser of 50 acres or 1.5% of the developable land area at the time. Is 1.5% of the developable land area of Medfield more than 50 acres?
Can't remember if I did that calculation or
And
not.
what's included? Because there's so much public land.
Yes, I know, we did it. We did a map of your excluded and sensitive land. Sensitive land is the second type of land. I haven't talked to you about it yet. And you have an impressive amount of excluded land. I don't know, I'd have to go back and check that. I did check a couple of the calculations. So where I got the numbers from, just so you know, is HLC has an MBTA Communities Act website. And there's a drop-down table in there, and you can look up any of the communities, and the information is in there. So I didn't have to do the calculations. I have been doing them for some communities.
It just might be worth confirming because we may not agree with what we think should be excluded. I think you went through this with the affordable housing.
Yeah.
Before we
Yeah, I think the number is very similar.
Yeah. So yeah, we can look into that and do the calculation. That's not a problem. So multifamily housing, a lot of people have images in their mind about what multifamily housing does and does not look like. And many of the comments in the popular press have been targeted more towards the larger size, what we would call the mid-rise or greater here. And this is an image by a company called Opticos that wrote a book called Missing Middle Housing. And this idea of missing middle housing is something that we've been talking about, especially with the adjacent communities and the adjacent small towns, because some of these types of housing is already found in many of these communities. So when we think of missing middle housing, we think the requirements under 3A are a 3-family or greater, or more than one building per lot with more than one housing unit per building, which at its minimum would be 2 duplexes. So if you think of the lower end as being a 3-family or 2 duplexes, and then the higher end is, you know, all the way up to what the community wants to do. But this idea of that 3 and 4 up to probably the courtyard apartments, bungalows, the townhouses, the multiplexes, we think of it as like 4 to 8 units or 4 to 12 units, 6 to 12 units, 8 to 20, that sort of range is a housing type that would fit well in many of our New England communities, but is also missing a problem. So we tend to think it's either single family or it's a lot of older housing, some of which actually does fit the missing middle, but there's not very much of it anymore. So, and what we have is aging. So this is something that just to show you that multifamily housing isn't just this, it's actually all of that missing middle plus the mid-rise housing. Now let's talk about density a little bit. So I've mentioned it was dwelling units per acre. So we're back to our blue block. And we're showing an area. So zoning is allowing for 150 units on 10 acres. Math is easy. We have 150 dwelling units per acre. So from a capacity and from a density, we are totally compliant. Density can be impacted, however, by restricted land or excluded land, as we just talked about. And we mentioned a park, and the park, in fact, is one of the definitions or one of the categories of excluded land. So it's environmentally protected land. That's Title 5, surface water is excluded land. Public land in general, there is an exception for that. Land that is permanently conserved is excluded land. And one of the highest level of wellhead protection is also excluded land. With public land, there is a way to override it, but it is very specific. So some communities have land that they've been wanting to, it's publicly owned, but they've been wanting to develop for housing. And they're saying, hey, can we do this, right? It's listed as public land now. There is a override in the compliance model that allows you to say, we have public land and it is fully in the process of being disposed of for housing. So it can't be we'd like to do this someday. it has to be, though, we are in the process. One that I imagine is something that you're looking at, given our conversations. You can override that. So normally, if it is owned by the municipality, it would be fully excluded, but there is a column in there where you can override it and put the acreage that is going to be used for housing. The example we used at the time was a school, but maybe you're only disposing of the school and not all of the land. So you put the developable area in there, the land that's actually being disposed of, and you have to put a note as to why you're doing that. And that allows you to override it, allows HLC to see that there's been an override, and you can do it that way. But otherwise, it is excluded. What that does, though, is it reduces the denominator. So if your numerator is, I'm taking you back to the third grade now, if your numerator is the number of dwelling units and your denominator is the area, we excluded land, that's your denominator, which means you go from a MBTA district with 10 acres and you want to do, you have to only have 8 acres. Yeah, you can get 15 dwelling units per acre, but if you have a requirement for 150 units, which was true of the first town that we worked with on it, you're not actually going to be compliant, right? Because your density or your units is going to be impacted by that part being there.
Little math question here.
Yeah, please.
So the bottom one here, I get that that's 120 units, 8 acres, but the question I'd asked before was, if you zoned it for 150 units
Yeah.
on 8 acres, so the 10 acres collectively was 15 units. Is that compliant?
So you're on the 10 acres, you've zoned it for 150 units, you've got 15 dwelling units per acre, you are compliant. If you are, I always have problems, I didn't actually do this original slide. If you are zoning and you need to have 10 acres, and you're not getting the capacity you need over the 10 acres. In other words, you have to go up.
I'm saying I'm saying that the second situation,
Yes.
8 acres of the 10 acres is developable.
Yes.
If you zone the 8 acres of the 10 acres, not at 15 units per acre, but at 20, 18 or whatever, 8
Yes.
times whatever to get to
Exactly.
150.
You're fine. You're totally compliant. Yes,
Are you
absolutely.
compliant for 10 acres or compliant for 8
You're
acres?
compliant with the 8 acres because it's the 8 acres of developable land. Sorry, I see your question now. You confused me with the first one. Yeah, and you can absolutely zone above. In fact, most communities.
Well,
will.
I don't think I'm going there with it. I'm just trying to figure out how to comply with the algorithm here.
Yes, yes, your answer is correct. So when we look at density, we start to look at these factors. We've been calling them levers and later slides. So you've got the district size is a large district. You've got a low unit capacity because you've got restrictive zoning and you've got low density. Obviously, that's red because you're not going to be in compliance. If you are sort of moving these around, now you're moving your district size up to more medium. You've got a less restrictive zoning, you've got more unit capacity, and you've got higher density. You're moving towards compliance on this. You can also go super large, super permissive, then you get super high unit capacity and super high density, at least on those particular ones. That's all relative, right, to what you started with. But the point is these start to move together. So if you change one, it's going to have an impact on the others. And that's the type of modeling that we're doing with communities. It's helping them understand if we move one thing, what's the next thing that moves. So we're looking for 750 units. We're looking for 15 dwelling units across all districts. I've had any number of people saying, well, why don't we just divide the 15 into the 750 and we'll zone that area and call it a day. Excluded land means that you can't do that. It's not that simple. It is not the 10 acres plus and 150 units equals 15 acres because you take out 2. And that's why that math doesn't work. Stop there. Any more questions on that? Because we're about to get into the zoning, which for me is the fun part. So, yeah.
Again, it's a philosophical question, so you may not know the answer, but that suggests to me that the state is saying, we want 15 units per acre we don't really want more than 15 units per acre, because I don't inherently see what's wrong with 10 acres of which 8 are developable at a higher unit count. Again, going back to the model of the park in the middle.
The park in the
don't
middle with
see-
higher density around is perfectly.
Yeah, but you're not
Yeah.
getting credit for the 10 acres to comply. They say, oh, it'd be wonderful.
What it
And I
means
don't
is that you have to
understand
have
why
a
that-
higher, sorry, I interrupted.
Well,
Go ahead, yeah.
I just don't see why the state would find that objectionable, that's all.
The idea of having a higher density around the park would not be objectionable at all.
Except that it's not sufficient to comply with a 50-acre minimum. So I'm saying I want the credit for 10 acres
Right.
with the higher density, and I don't understand the philosophy that says, oh, that's a bad thing.
Oh, I see what you're getting at. Your geography is still the 10 acres. That's not a problem. So you get your credit for having 10 acres. Your density, however, it's 8 in the denominator, not 10. So
Oh,
then,
yeah, no,
yeah, okay, yeah,
that's how you get to the higher density.
yeah, exactly.
I'm saying if you had
But you still
150,
get,
you had
yes,
150 units for the 10 acres, but 2 were not developable, but you were still zoning for 150 acres on the other 8,
yes,
you would be getting 10 acres toward the 50.
yes.
Okay,
yes,
all right.
Yeah, no, you're fine.
Glad I asked the question.
Yes. That's why I'm here. I just
Okay,
misunderstood
okay,
what
got
you
it.
were asking. Yeah, absolutely. All right, zoning. So why can't we count existing developments? Why can't we count projects that we know are about to be developed? Some communities have a large pipeline. Some communities have already been doing a lot of work. And that is because we're doing zoning, not production. It's not a production target. And the reason that's important is because zoning doesn't care what's on the lot now. So back to our famous blue blob, that's what zoning looks at, right? It says there's a parcel and it's this many parcels and it's got, these dimensional standards on them, but zoning treats the parcels as though there's nothing else on it. For the purposes of creating new zoning, that's a little simplified, but when we look at that map, when we look at those parcels, anything could be on there. They could be empty right now. They could have any of those 3 images of different building types and different uses. The top one's a mixed use with apartments, and you've got duplexes, a series of duplexes, and you've got a larger multifamily. Those could all be on that now, but what matters for the future is what it's zoned for. So think about zoning as what can be there from the perspective of the community, what should be there, but not necessarily what's there now. And you can actually see that in a lot of our current, very traditional New England neighborhoods. If you've ever had seen a neighborhood where somebody's come and built a really big house on a neighborhood that has a lot of existing smaller houses on it in that neighborhood, it's almost certainly because the zoning allows the bigger house. That zoning came into place after all of those other houses were built, so that the existing houses are frequently not actually in compliance with the existing zoning. That's a traditional pattern in New England, because much of New England was built before zoning came into place, and that leads to a lot of variances.
So the entire 50 acres the town comes up with have to be undeveloped.
No, and that's a great question, and I'm glad you asked it. It means that the zoning doesn't care about what's on them now. Zoning has no heart in this respect. The zoning is new. It's about what could be on them in the future. So, for example, you might be considering an area that has some multifamily that's already developed on it. That's great. If that multifamily just happens to, you can look at what its current density is per acre. And if it works with what you're proposing, that's terrific. If it's zoned to be more or less than what's there, as long as the zoning is compliant with what the state is looking for, then that's fine. Now, the problem from the zoning perspective is that have you just made that area that existing development non-compliant by the zoning that you've just created? And that's another question. But the model's agnostic on that. The model just wants to know what is the future zoning going to be. And that's why you're not counting towards that 750 something that's already built because it's built, or something that's in the pipeline because it's come in under the past zoning. The model, the compliance model, is interested in what the future zoning is going to be. Yeah.
That's as bad.
Yeah.
We're gonna go for a while.
That's why I'm
No,
here.
I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying each time. Let me give a specific example here in town that
Please do that.
might not be, might not, I'm not worried about the 5 acre issue, but like the park.
Yes,
If I, in the early reading on this, I think the park has an actual density of 12 units per acre.
okay,
If we rezone, and let's for a minute assume right now the park was zoned to be compliant with what was required for the thing that was proposed, and it was 12 units per acre.
yeah,
And that's what it's zoned for. If we rezone the land that the park is on
uh-huh,
for 15 units per acre,
yeah,
that would,
that 15 units per acre counts. Yeah.
that's the best answer you've got.
I did try and win with at least. a
But
couple of
only
answers.
existing units count toward 750.
No. It's the future capacity of that land that counts towards the seven hundred and
It
fifty.
doesn't matter what you create, you're gonna have to have zoning to develop 750 new units of housing.
Zoning that allows for the possibility of 750 units.
Beyond
Yeah.
what's already there.
Yes, so if your 12 units per acre that you just mentioned, say that there's 24 units now, right? So you've got 24 units, we zoned it for 12 units per acre. You now rezone it for 15 units per acre. It still has 24 units on it. But it's zoned for 15 units per acre, which means that the capacity of the zoning is now based on that 15 units per acre. It doesn't change what's on the lot. You don't have to change that lot to, that development to bring it up to 15 units per acre. You just have to zone for it to be 15 units per acre.
You don't have to immediately go out and develop it.
No,
You just
absolutely
say
not. That's up to
We're
the.
enabling zoning
Yes,
to allow for that.
yes. The production is on the private side. The town is not responsible for producing the capacity. Yeah, that's the great.
It's new units. Has to be 750.
It has to be a potential capacity of.
But only if you tore the park down and built it
Yeah,
again.
that's right. The next owner, 75 years from now, tears it
Yeah.
down and wants to do a new development, they have to do it at 15
Yes,
per acre.
yeah.
And what we're considering doing so we don't create any new non-conformities or more needs for variances. They're hard to
We'll
get.
be out of work.
We could do an overlay district, which basically will keep the current zoning intact. You just add a new set of zoning that you have the option for. You can opt into it, but the base will remain the same. So you would still be compliant to it. Currently, it's, nothing is changing, but if you wanted to,
Mhm.
you can abide by these different sets of rules. And I think you can, if you wanna describe a little bit better what an overlay is, but,
Yes,
That's a by right. So, as I said.
by right. It has to be by right.
yeah.
You can do site plan review, but it has to be by right. So for example, I have a community that I'm working with that does in fact have a lot of housing units in a particular area. But they've also got some parcels that, for whatever reason, haven't been redeveloped. They've got one story. This is a city, so it's got, more dense development. They've got a couple of one-story buildings. It's a nice parcel, hasn't shifted. And then they've got, 6-story condos, 6-story apartments in the same general area. They are using this as part of their strategy. Yes, some of those are already built out and will stay built out, but by putting the zoning there, it might encourage those other parcels to be redeveloped, right? That's a valid strategy to use this for. And that's why I'm saying you really need to think about what you need in terms of housing and where it should be and what else you're trying to support, because that will make a difference. So again, unit capacity is a measure of the possibility. The state is saying your zoning has to provide for the possibility of at least 750 units. It's not a count of existing or project. There's nothing to add or subtract. We're just looking at possibility. So there's also some other restrictions in addition to the district and unit capacity test. And we've talked about some of these already. You can't mandate an age restriction. You can't regulate. And this is all to do with the suitability requirements that's in the legislation. You can't regulate the size of units, the bedroom size, the mix of bedrooms, the size of bedrooms, the number of occupants in a unit. You cannot, this has been a source of huge confusion. We cannot mandate mixed use development in the MBTA district. You can allow it, and that's what's confused a lot of people, is that they've assumed that it was a prohibition on mixed use. That's not true. You can allow it, but you also have to allow the multifamily as a right. And there are some zoning strategies around this, because there are a number of communities that are worried about keeping their commercial districts commercial. They're afraid if it goes to multifamily as a right, they will lose some of their commercial district. And so they've looked at the idea of maybe there's a bonus incentive for mixed use or for retaining some of the commercial. These are all strategies that go around that. Affordable housing requirements. So yes.
You
Excellent.
cannot regulate or limit the number of occupants in the unit. And
Yeah.
I'm not an expert in this area, but my understanding of the justification for regulating it has to do with water and sewer capacity, and in some cases, maybe even public health. How can I read that five families can choose to go into a unit? Everybody, some people are living in the garage, if there is one, some people are living in the living room. I'm saying this because that was not five, but that was happening 5 doors up from me for years in a house.
There's still health and safety legislation out there, right? There's the dwelling unit is defined as, unit for a household.
So you can, through health regulation.
Well, you can't sit there and say, a family of 5 people is allowed here, but not a family of 6 people, right?
That part.
But there are existing building codes and health codes that exist. So the zoning doesn't trump public safety, building, or health, right?
Okay, so
we're back to the difference between other regulations and zoning. The zoning cannot restrict the number of occupants.
okay,
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah, and that's a good question, by the way. All of your questions have been excellent, so don't worry. That's
Pushing my
that's why
limit.
you're here.
Can I add something?
Yeah, please.
I think the 3 or more people per bedroom, that's what's considered overcrowded for under federal standards. So I think that's where Board of Health would kick in if there was an issue or nuisance or threat to public safety.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you can't, I think what I'm hearing is that there's a unit here, it's a single family unit. You can't say how many people can make up a single family, but you can, through other regulations, not allow multiple families to limit a single family unit by packing it.
Right, and I think it's single household rather than family, but that gets into
That makes sense.
definitions, yeah. But yes, it does not supersede any of the existing regulations for health and safety. Affordable housing has been a big one, in that there have been communities that said that we need more affordable housing than the limitations that are put in place here. So the base is that you're allowed to have affordable housing requirements. It cannot exceed 10% of the total units offered at no less than 80% of the area median income. You can, of course, there's some other strategies. Again, you can do bonus incentives for deeper affordability or greater affordability, but the as of right is limited to that. And then the other issue is that you can do an economic feasibility analysis. So some communities that have had previous developments that have a deeper level of affordability have done an EFA or in the process of doing an EFA that proves that the deeper affordability level is not a restriction on development in their community. So in other words, if you can prove that developments in your area have been done, financial limitation, then you can put in a deeper affordability. I am not an expert on that, but I know Eric's been working with communities. So if we want to go into more detail on that, we can do that later in the process.
Can I ask?
Just to let you know, yes.
So I think I got this question from a resident in the past couple of weeks. Is why the 10%? Why not more?
Mm-hmm.
I think this was done as a requirement that if a town could easily say 50% of your units must be affordable, then that'll effectively stop any developer from ever using the zoning because they're going to end up losing money. So if it's a way to, contribute, you can still contribute to affordable housing stock, but the developer, there will be an incentive for them to also want to come and do it. So it's a way to keep it realistic, I guess.
Yeah.
And the other thing I've heard about size of bedrooms, children, how many children are going to come into the school system. And I know that for the state hospital, actually, there was a study done for how many children are added per bedroom. And I think for 2 to 3 bedrooms, the chances of that specific unit bringing in one child to the school system was like 20 to 30%. So it is not a super high number. I've discussed this with other Norfolk County like large developers and other planners and planning boards, and the numbers are pretty consistent across the board. It's be 20 to 30%. So it is not even large developments don't have significant impacts on the school system. So it's just something to keep in mind.
You said, just to clarify, a 20 to 30% chance of children in the unit, not 20 to 30% of the units.
Yes, chance per unit. Yeah, roll the dice.
Yeah.
So one question related to maybe using Gus's example of the park, which is 40B development, right? That has 25% affordable units in it now. Right?
Yes.
You could rezone it and have that restriction of cannot exceed 10% because it's existing, right? Okay.
Yes, because it would stay with its existing restriction. It's done under the 40B rules. So again, when we do zoning changes, the existing use remains, right? It doesn't, and that's why you get the possibility of nonconformities. You might rezone a parcel that you own from residential to commercial. Your residential house would then be non-conforming to that commercial use, but it doesn't change your ability to stay and live in your house. Where it comes in is when the property owner wants to make a change. Same is true here. If you rezone for 15 units per acre, it stays at your 12 units per acre unless the property owner wants to invoke that zoning and make a change to it. So, yes.
Do you know how this, so 2 years ago, you're being encouraged to adopt inclusion, or 3 years ago, inclusionary zoning, which is what we now have. So things like the state hospital project is 25%. How does the town, how does this intersect with, it's like, the thing that bugs me about this is the state said, we want you to run to this corner of the ring. We did.
Right.
And now it's like, oh, no. Now we want you to run to the other corner of the ring. How does this interact with inclusionary zoning requirements?
So it depends on how the town wrote them. It is one of the things that I will check as part of the process.
Ours will not comply.
Yeah, thank you. That just saved me a whole bunch of research. So there's a couple of ways you can do that. The most sort of drastic way is to change your existing inclusionary housing. I wouldn't recommend that. I would just put a different standard in this, in the overlay, and basically say, in this overlay, the affordable housing requirements are X. And that way the inclusionary zoning continues to apply to the rest of the town. That's the simplest way of doing it. So you've gone to all that trouble of putting inclusionary zoning in. So don't change it when you could just add it to the overlay. So, all right, so so we've talked a little bit about what the guidelines or what the compliance model is looking for. There are a number of different ways that a community can control how big, how much, how wide, how tall. Some of them start to work against each other. So I've seen communities that do building height and lot and building coverage and floor area ratio and deep setbacks and open space requirements. And you put all of those on there, and what you really get is a mess. But there is a way of figuring out which requirements make the most sense. Some of these in particular, not the setbacks, but everything else feeds directly into the model. There are other, if you delve into the model, if you're of the mind that you love Excel and want to look at it, we collect in the model a lot of information. Not all of it feeds into unit capacity, and some of it is because the information we're collecting indicates a red flag that the model won't catch, but HLC would catch. So let's bring it all together. We've got land area requirements, 50 acres, size of one district, half, 50%. Minimum unit size of 750 units. You don't need to worry about your minimum station area. And obviously the 15 dwelling units per acre. And so we pull all of those together, test your zoning, iterate, test again. And just, when you think of the land area requirements, where you're putting your zoning is just important in some cases of how large it is. So with that, I'm just obviously previewing that we'll have a community input session on December 14th. We can talk about that more, but if there's any, yes, this is even more than this time for discussion. And I have maps, by the way.
No, this one's, I think, straight, fall down.
Yeah.
So you have 50 acres, 15 units per acre, which has zoning of 750. If you do, whatever you do, designate that.
Mhm.
It strikes me that for sure, you want to make it 10% affordable.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like, even though it can't be more than 10% affordable, you don't want it to be less than 10%
Yes.
affordable, because
Yeah.
otherwise then you dig a hole around your overall 40.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Got it.
Other questions? You've just been asking while somebody else, needs to, you've been volunteering here today.
Yeah, we'll just guide never.
Let me just check the Q&A,
Yes.
make sure this.
I would much rather have people asking questions. Yes, sir.
Well, I'm curious about the excluded land.
Yes.
I mean, we've got a school down here, three Montrose School, it's on maybe 10, 15 acres. What's the thought of, is that excluded land, I guess?
That is excluded land, yes.
What things are, it sounds like public lands are excluded.
Mhm. I can pull up my laptop and I'll put it out. So surface water is excluded. Title V, the first level of the, gone from my head now. The buffers around, water, parkland, protected open space. Then there's sensitive land, which I haven't mentioned. So sensitive land is okay to use for your unit capacity calculations. Sensitive lands is floodplains. It's like the second level of Title V, the second level of the water protection areas. Prime agricultural soils is also in sensitive land.
Is all town land excluded?
Yes.
What would
All
Montrose
public land.
be excluded?
Is it available
It-
for disposition for housing?
Yeah, it's privately owned.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought, you said it was public land.
It's a school.
Oh, yeah, then that's, if it's privately owned, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize it was privately owned.
The show and plaza.
Is it privately owned?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Should probably on site.
Now that comes into the, what else do you want? So when there's a couple of things I didn't mention on the zoning, bless you, that you should be aware of. They're not on the slides. Bless you. Getting allergic to the zoning.
I can hear the AC and just.
So you can do development standards in there. So I mentioned it has to be as of right. You can do site plan review, but obviously not the special permit if it's as of right. If you're doing site plan review and sample zoning, there's a sample site plan review criteria, set of criteria. You can do development standards with that. And this gets back to what you said about the affordability is the development standards have to be tied to site plan review. You can't require things of the multifamily in the district that you're not requiring of everybody else. So for example, you can't say all multifamily in our overlay must provide 100% solar energy to the units, but not have a requirement for commercial in that same area. So, and the other thing to know is that you can set up to do design guidelines. You can put that into the zoning that the planning board can create design guidelines and use them. So you can look at architectural standards, landscape standards, and so forth and so on. The design guidelines have to be advisory. Anything that you do on the development standards has to be quantifiable. So you can't put a development standard that says this must be an attractive building because that is completely subjective. So, there is that possibility, however, to put in those guidelines. They do have to be specific as well. So a lot of communities are concerned about, well, how do we control what this looks like beyond how big, how high, how much, how wide, and the development standards and the design guidelines work to that. A lot of people are also using, or communities are using development standards for things like thinking about stormwater management, other requirements about circulation, whether it's pedestrian or vehicle access, safe access, the usual site plan requirements there. So, yes,
So if you look at our Medfield State Hospital site
Mhm.
compliance, that can't be part of this because it's down is that the problem?
It is in a process where it's going to be used for housing. We think it's going to be part of the strategy, but it's not the full strategy. Maria, do you want to talk more about this? Do you want me to say something about this?
So and Christine,
Christine?
if you want to jump in, I think you have more context than I do.
So we had a meeting at the state hospital, probably a month ago now, 5 weeks ago, and Secretary of Justice, who is the new Secretary of HLC, was at that meeting. Who loves the state hospital project, it's fantastic. And then he seemed kind of shocked when I said it wasn't going to count for MBTA zoning. So he is trying to work with us. The problem is they don't want to give an exemption to Medfield for this project because there's 10 other towns behind us who aren't building housing who are looking for that exemption. They recognize that we started the state hospital project before MBTA was even passed. So we're kind of stuck in that middle. We started it before they want to give us credit for building the housing, but they also want to make sure, we're following the letter of the law. The interesting part in this project is that the state hospital project needs housing works funding. So for anybody who says, oh, we're just not going to follow the MBTA zoning, we're going to fail it because we don't need that money, we actually need the second year funding of that for the project. So recognizing that, Secretary Augustus is working with us. We had a meeting this week, kind of kicked off the discussions again. When we originally talked to them, they had said no because it was public land,
Right.
and we had an LBA. They've since refined that over the last year, and they're willing to work with us. So we're really hoping, I'm hoping it's our 100% strategy. I don't need a plan B, but we at least got commitment that it'll be part of the strategy. And hopefully we'll have an answer for that before we go to town meeting. So, but until then, we're kind of running on these parallel tracks because of the housing work grant.
So when we worked earlier, we tested the state hospital, we've tested 2 other districts as possibilities just to see what it would look like. I think where we are is that there's not, we're not standing here tonight saying, the plan is X. We're still evaluating. So I do have 2 maps. If anybody wants to get up and scribble and point to things on maps, what I did was, I have your excluded land, I have your sensitive land on here, and then I've identified the state hospital site, and I've identified in sort of a pale yellow, so nobody thinks it's a hard idea. The 2 other districts, we just tested to see what it looked like. And so we love people's feedback on that as well, maybe after we get through the Q&A. So,
I
yeah.
know we have people online to speak as well, but just a quick question. Just want to be very clear. There's no time limit as to when these 750 units would have to be on.
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
We're just saying you have to create zoning. That's the art of the possibility that would allow for these MBTA.
Right.
And in our thoughts are these overlay districts, which don't have to be contiguous in one big pot, could be several smaller plots.
Exactly. As long as you have the one.
Minimum.
Yeah.
I'm very confused about the production versus future zoning requirement as it relates to the state hospital and Christine's comments. Just, it's not so much that the project will yield or produce units, it's that you want that land mass in the developable base, so to speak, of our 50 acres.
Right.
Is that really the point?
So the point is that you're going to produce X amount of that, and I'll let you speak to those. But what it's zoned for, what its capacity, you're wanting the capacity that the zone is for, which is not necessarily the same thing that you're going to produce.
Right, so when we did the zoning for the state hospital, it can do the 750 units on that site. Then we entered into the LDA with Trinity, which is only 334. So the original pushback from HLC and the state was, well, you already agreed to only 334 units. So we're asking them to look back at that because we all know that our colleagues, some of our other towns, I won't throw them under the bus, Dedham, places that are never going to be housing. They've zoned legacy, they're using legacy plates. we know that's not going to be housing. So our appeal to the secretary was, we're actually building the housing. And as a town, collectively, we voted unanimously pretty much to do this without the threat of MBTA. So we're essentially, you're punishing us for actually building the units where if the whole goal and what the governor is trying to accomplish is actually producing additional housing stock, we're doing it, not just zoning for it.
And that was something we said when he was in visiting, is that part of my frustration, and I voiced it at a conference in January this year. We voiced it quite a few times when we have right here. I actually asked him, why wouldn't you allow a town like Medfield that's actually active, right? Because where I get fed up with the politics of the state is move your lips and that's all you have to do versus act on it. So here we are in town getting ready to make way for 334 occupiable homes or apartments. We're acting on it. We are literally going to be able to get people to have a place to live versus the game. And that's what I think it is. It's just a stupid game that the state's playing that will set aside a parking lot and we'll say we can build there. And you're never going to do that. So what are you wasting people's time, money, and energy versus really, if you mean something, Governor Haley, put up and shut up and say to Medfield, you know what, you're acting on it? We're going to reduce you from 750 to 550. And any town that steps up in the next 12 months and you actually act on it, we'll reduce yours. And those that want to drag their heels may end up picking up the slack. But do something to get people to act on it. But it's just so frustrating to know that we are trying to do something and we're getting penalized and we're getting pushback. It makes you want to go to Shaw's Plaza, do it and say, yeah, good luck. That's never going to happen. Hey, Governor Haley, good for you. That was kudos. That was awesome.
So
Don't-
we're
don't
working with the
disagree.
secretary.
No, I was gonna say, don't disagree on the frustration element. I can hear that. I completely understand why you're frustrated. My goal as part of the consultant team that's helping you is to help you figure out that strategy that works. So, if we have to rerun some of the models on the state hospital, if we have to look at some of the areas, what portion of it that works. So they'll let you count the whole 750, or they'll let you count a portion of it. We've got to look at something else. Will they give you some sort of offset? We don't know yet, but we're here to try and help you, A, find that solution, and then B, communicate with everybody else about what that solution is. Maybe we're getting some input about what that's the solution should be, especially at the December 14th meeting, especially if we don't have an answer yet. We're here to help you get to that finish line, however that may be. And it could be multiple. I will say, I do have quite a few clients that are very serious about using this act to promote housing in their community. They are seeing it as that option to have a hard conversation, but they just haven't been able to have it before. I do have some communities that say, we're going to have to, just because the way our community is structured, we are going to have to zone some places that already have housing, but we'd like to zone some places like that one I mentioned earlier that don't, so we can get, a coordinated strategy in this particular area. But yeah, it's frustrating when you've been working on something for so long and then the rules change and it makes your life more difficult. So we're here to help you through all of that and get you to where you need to be. Yeah.
It's just, we want more housing in the state, right? So let's incentivize towns to actually do it.
Yeah.
The thing that I analyzed as working best in Medfield is most likely practically to create affordable housing of the size that we need. 1,000 square foot house is if we do accessory dwelling units. And it sounds to me like accessory dwelling units don't comply with this at all, so that
Yes,
they're just not in the equation.
that is unfortunately true. Yeah. You could do, I asked facetious, I don't remember which community I was working on, and I know Eric was doing the analysis. And I said, hey, Eric, what happens if, because we were going through a couple of different scenarios. I said, what happens if you just rezone everything to 3 family? And he said, actually, I think for this community that might work. So now, that's a pretty blanket strategy, right? I wouldn't recommend a community just say, oh, we're not going to even talk about it. We're just going to do 3 family and we're done. Because, that's not really taking into account local needs, local considerations. But what I am saying is that, yeah, the opportunity to look at different possibilities, ADU isn't, but maybe there's some areas of town where duplexes, 2 duplexes on a site would be perfect. You could have a front one that, if you've got a deep lot, The first one may be an existing two-family or a house that's large enough to convert into a two-family. And then you allow a two-family behind it, maybe that particular house, we're thinking in our example has a barn that could become a two-family. Now that, property is allowed to have 4 units on it. And, as long as we can figure out what the acreage would be, if we've got the right part of town geographically, a strategy like that could also contribute to your solution. So, yes.
This is sort of an editorial comment,
Mhm.
but, and it's actually appealing to you, you have a background in community planning, so the issue I wrestle with, because we're talking about how to comply
Mhm.
with a state mandated requirement, and I think a lot of what we've done in this town, we already are trying to figure out how to do these things in ways that work.
Yes.
And then you have people coming in from Boston saying, oh, no, we live in the city, we'll tell you how to do this. And that is frustrating, but leave that aside.
Mhm.
Forget the compliance.
Yes.
40 years ago, there were a lot of multifamily homes here in Massachusetts. And then laws were passed that allowed those multifamily homes to be subdivided into individual condos, which immediately set up an economic proposition for a property owner that said, I get a lot more money extracted from individual condo sales, even though I sell a 2 or 3 family, split it up.
Mhm.
Don't worry about how it gets managed. It's just you 3 all bought unit and you're gonna all figure it out. And I just extracted a lot more money out of a 3 family than we would have had when those 3 families would have been affordable. So now we decimated those by changing that rule. When I think about Medfield,
Mhm.
and for a second here, let's assume we do need 10 acres and we decide, well, most of these folks that do this, they just put it in your city center. Well, so when we zone 10 acres on South Street,
Mhm.
now what happens, the thing that I'm concerned about is what are the economic dynamics that you set up when you do that? And it's the same thing as what you just described. Well, we can take this historic place and if you can put 2 family in the front, 2 family in the back, the barn's still there. Like, yes, and the people that own that property, perhaps if they're looking to leave, will say, hey, I can sell 4 living units. I get a good price for this as a 1.5 acres with a barn. I'll get a whole lot more with 4 living units here. And the issue is, so how do, worrying about how we actually change the character of our community that we not get so distracted with how do we play this game to comply with this law,
Mhm.
that we actually make economic decisions that lead to stupid stuff that now the state is trying to reverse from what they did 40 years ago when they basically said, sure, let's condoize everything.
So a couple of things on that. One, you've just proved why blanket suggestions don't work without looking at a local context. So, I'm giving you examples. These are not recommendations.
So
They're
I asked it editorial to make sure you were thinking of those kinds of things.
exactly. Yeah, no, that is a good point. But the other thing is the law is silent on ownership versus rent. So if you have a house that's turned into 3 condominiums, that is 3 dwelling units on that parcel, it would comply just as much as if it were 3 rental units. So, yes, there is an economic thing where, say you have I'm going to make that easy for myself. You have a $900,000 house and you can turn it into 3 units and sell them each for $450 instead of $300. Yeah, the owner of that, maybe they keep one of those units and they sell the other 2. Yes, they've gotten more money. Those units are more expensive than they might have been as just a third, but less expensive than the entire house. Is that a good thing for this community or not? I think that's part of the discussion. But those 3 units as condo units still count as multifamily.
But totally to that point,
Yes.
as soon as someone, and this actually came up with a neighbor of ours who wanted to build a separate unit for their parents from Romania to come.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Now they've moved 2 years later back to Texas where they started. So we would have had 2 independent housing units in our backyard,
Right.
1 acre zoning with 2 on 1 acre. The economic incentive for somebody who can do that is going to be there. And then it will be there for their neighbors because it's like, well, I don't live in the nice place. It's not the same thing. I might as well cash in too and go take that extra money and go live where I wanted, in a place that I wanted to live. That's what I see very easily happening, because that certainly is what happened with the multifamily units, where you used to have stretches of them. But as soon as one gets condoized and somebody goes, oh, well, I can get that kind of money for this. Why would I sell my 2-family unit at the market price for a 2-family unit with the rental I get from the extra unit, when I can subdivide and sell each one of them at that, in the case you're using part of it? Why would I sell something for 900,000 when I can sell it for 1.2 million?
We could probably have an hour or 2 long conversation on this, actually, but I suspect not everybody's going to want to listen to it. Yeah, exactly. Leave it as something that we're going to talk about further, but there was an interesting statement that you made in the middle of it, which I just want to call out because it goes back to the development standards and the design guidelines I mentioned earlier, which is when the second unit comes in, the place isn't as nice anymore. That's not a given, right? Yes, there's going to be another family there, but that gets back to how is that development done? What is the site plan review of that? Is it just jammed in? Is it nicely landscaped? How is the access? How do the 2 units work together? How do the 2 units now work with the rest of the neighborhood? Because you had one that was already in the neighborhood. Now you've got a second. How does it work with it? There's a lot that goes into that unit that doesn't necessarily mean it's an automatic, not as nice place to live. And I think that's where community values come into. And that's part of, this is my segue to December 14th, right? That's part of the discussion on December 14th is how does something like this start to work for Medfield? And how do we have those discussions together to find a strategy that works for Medfield? Might not work for everybody else, and that's why we do localized planning. So excellent point.
We want to see if Bill has a question. I don't know if he.
Oh, yeah, let me.
Yes, let's not forget about the online. Thank you.
Right. So for the people online, I have Bill, Chris, Deb, Jean, and Paul. Do any of you guys have a question that you'd like to ask? You can type it in the Q&A if you wish, or you can ask it live. I think everyone has the opportunity to talking permitted. Okay. So I don't think there's any questions. Is there?
Yes, so while we're waiting for this.
Oh, perfect. We got 2 questions. Bill, no question at this time. Perfect. Chris is also all set. Chris.
And you showed us a map of the beginning of the MBTA communities.
Yes,
It looked to me like Boston wasn't included.
Boston is not included. Yes, they are exempted from the law.
They're also exempt from every zoning law that you can think of. They have their own zoning code.
Yeah, Boston has its own zoning.
Is that just because they have more legislators than we do?
They're just way too old and have much precedent. They are under different rules.
They do have a very complicated zoning code.
Yeah.
Boston is Boston.
Yeah. I didn't know we had to use black and white. That's amended. Yeah.
Really?
In Boston, you have to put black and white.
I did not know that.
And he built in South Boston. Okay, one, and I'm like, oh, it's goofy, but not my choice.
Any questions from this side of the room? Planning board, anything you got?
Not a question, but it's on the, when the public is.
Oh, I didn't see it.
When the greater public, that people come to public, are looped in, I feel like starting the conversation with how we're addressing the state hospital as a potential compliance mechanism or a part of the compliance strategy, if not the entire strategy, is really important because people are not going to want to hear that there's could be another district with 750 units somewhere else in Medfield. We don't really have anywhere else to put it that isn't really impactful.
Yes. So agreed, and you all are the ones that get the sort of the in-depth dive because as land use or the select board or other interested boards, knowing how the model works. My guess is most people aren't going to have the patience for an hour and a half long presentation. So yes, we will focus. I think your point about starting with the state hospital and how that works into the requirements makes a lot of sense. And then we'll focus, not that they're not welcome to watch this, and they're certainly welcome to ask questions at the meeting about, any of this, but I feel that this longer presentation probably doesn't work.
Well, I think the challenge, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the challenge, which is why we're all here tonight, is we need to get the citizens to support this. And the hard cold fact is, if our tax rate is 17, I'm gonna make it a 17.2 right now, and somebody stands up at town meeting and says, the hell with this, we're gonna do our own thing. Well, then they have to realize that 17.2 might be 38 point something, because all of that funding that you showed at the very beginning, we're no longer eligible for. So when roads need to be repaired and certain things need to be done, we're all gonna be footing the bill. So that's where the state kind of has us over a barrel, whether people like this or not, we need to comply. So now it's up to everyone in this room to think about how do we do it in the most efficient way, so that when we all say yes, because we're gonna have to, we do it with our eyes wide open. And that's our challenge, right?
I think that's a fair way of, thinking about it. And it's what are you saying yes to, and how do we all collectively get there, as a community? Even though you are the leaders. I think Christine's point too earlier was the state hospital, that development that you all worked so hard on, from my understanding, being at risk from non-compliance is probably the biggest immediate impact. So, keeping that in mind is huge.
Can you zone and then rezone at some point in time, as long as you keep the acreage requirements?
Yeah, you can rezone the area. In fact, I was talking to the community about this. You would just have to go back to HLC and say, hey, we're rezoning our MBTA communities area or our compliant area. This is what we're doing, and you'd have to recheck the compliance. But yeah, zoning can always be changed. So something else to think about. Yes.
Am I allowed to ask a question? Yeah. Okay. I think to your points about bringing the community on, just being one little person in the community, to understand what the commitment is going to be from us after the 12/31/24 deadline of compliance in terms of when you're going to enact this, because why are we doing this exercise for no point unless the ultimate goal is to eventually be putting this housing together to solve the problem that you originally brought up that you're describing as this big issue, right? I think you need to be fully transparent with the community. I want to know that's the one answer I want. Like, when is the game plan after that? And I want it in writing. And when are you expecting the 750 units? And why, if we are only 4,400 homes in the town, and the minimum was supposed to be based on 10% of that, which would be 440, are we having to suck it up for the extra 310?
It's a two-part.
Sorry.
Last
I'm
question
just gonna get
first.
straight up about it.
It's a two-part calculation with it, I can go back to. But your question about timing was an excellent one. So your other one was excellent too, but that is a key one that I want to make sure everybody understands is you have to be compliant by the end of next December 31st, 2024. What that means is that the zoning has to be in place by December 31st, 2024. The schedule that we're currently on is to go to the May town meeting. So the zoning would be approved then. It would go to the Attorney General. The Attorney General would review it. Also go to HLC. They would review it. The idea is by going in the spring, everything would be done well before December 2024. The unit capacity of 750 or whatever you end up with, there's no deadline on when those would be produced. That's up to the private market. It could be.
So
There's no assurance that they actually ever would.
That is correct.
Just setting up
Yes.
an area that it could be built.
I think it's important to acknowledge that the zoning requires it to be as of right. So
Yeah.
if someone presented a
Right.
plan,
Yeah.
you can't say no.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. That is
we're
correct. Yeah, but what I'm saying, this is an important part of it, is the town itself is not required to produce those units, right? There's no deadline that says the town has to have 750 units in place by X. It is zoning for the possibility of 750 units. Your point was excellent. It's as of right. So somebody could then come in with an application and say, I'd like to build 10 units. I'd like to build 60 units, whatever. That application, although it's a by right application, if the town chooses to put site plan review into it, it would then go to the site plan review authority, which I'm assuming would be the planning board. So we'll just assume that for the moment. And there would be a meeting to go through the site plan and then the planning board.
It's the same process as the
Yeah.
state hospital.
Exactly. And so, but those units have to go through that process. But there's no deadline that says the units have to be built by a certain time, that all of the units have to be built, that any of the units have to be built. That's why I'm trying to make a difference between zoning and production. Zoning is the town's requirement. Zoning is under the town's control. Setting up the process by which an application would be reviewed is under the town's control. Actual creation, production of the units, not under the town's control. They are not responsible for creating those units.
Okay, so it's kind of like a new version of a 40B requirement by the state, or a different type of.
Yeah, it's very different. All it's saying, so, say you own a piece of property and it is zoned for a single family house. And I come along, I'm the town all by myself. I come along and say, okay, you can put, a 3-family house on here. Do you immediately do that? See, this is what I'm saying. So it's up to each individual property owner, whether or not they take advantage of that overlay. Some will, some won't. And so that's why I'm saying town doesn't have, there's no deadline by which any units have to be.
And I'm sorry, I'm just talking, but
No,
is
no,
there a
this is
reverse requirement? Because in the conversation that you just had, you said that we can't put any restrictions on these properties or these 750, right? That is not also being imposed on other single family homes.
No.
Does it work in reverse?
Beautiful question. That is a great question. You can't put it on properties within the same district. So for example, say you did your overlay district and you allowed multifamily and you allowed mixed use and you allowed commercial. Say you had, we could have a 3-story office building, a 3-story mixed use building, or a 3-story multifamily building, right? And you put in your development standards, the multifamily has to be 100% solar ready. Oh no, 100% solar has to go on the making something that's expensive for the sake of the argument. 100% solar on the multifamily. The mixed use in the office building, no, they can just go as of right, no problem. Multifamily alone has to have the solar. That makes the multifamily more expensive to build, less feasible. That is not allowed. If, however, you said the multifamily, the commercial, the mixed use all have to be solar ready within this district, I believe, I have to check with HLC if you go in that direction, I believe that would be allowed because you're not making a distinction for the multifamily and you are not requiring something that is potentially prohibitively expensive. So that's the difference. Yes.
Did you know of anybody still cheating? I'm reading, I'm talking about, I've done a bunch of town committees, including selected for most of my life. And, but I found out, somebody told me I could qualify for affordable housing. I worked full time till I was 75. My husband worked part time till he was 80. We own 3 properties. I have a lot of socks and a lot of safety. We were very safe, careful. But when my husband and I were getting older, we put everything in the kids' names. So it's on the family trust. So on paper, the only thing I own is my Social Security. And we had several people over the years I've been on this board that found out it did exactly, they cheated and they did one for affordable housing even though they didn't need it. And that drove me nuts.
I can see that it would. I am not an expert on affordable housing other than a very high level of planning. So I can't answer that question. So I don't know the base requirements.
Some decent, hardworking people need it. I see other people cheating on it. It's awful. I'm watching it nowadays.
Sorry?
I hope so.
Yes, ma'am.
So you have a property.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's a large lot.
Yeah.
So developer comes in, the person selling it. If it's a 40B, there's restrictions. Am I understanding correctly that under this new arrangement, the 40B could be no restrictions, and what was a single family could now become an unit apartment complex?
No, that is not necessarily correct. So first of all, the property would have to be within the overlay district that the town is going to eventually set up, right? That's part of the discussion. So there's 2 types of zoning. There's base zoning. Every property, pretty much every property has a base zone. Some are single family, some are mixed use zones, some are commercial, some are industrial, then that zone always applies. Then there's something called an overlay district that sits on top of that base zone. And the overlay district sets up a slightly different set of rules. It says if you are the property owner, you can choose to develop under the base district or under the overlay district. Once you've made that choice, everything you apply for has to be within the district you chose. So if you choose to apply in the base district, your application has to follow those rules. If you choose to apply under the overlay district, your application has to follow those rules. And that's important because that means there are rules for the overlay district. So what will happen in the overlay district is that there will be a list of uses. Well, first of all, there'll be a district, right? There'll be a boundary that says the properties within this boundary can apply under the overlay district. Then there'll be a set of uses that are allowed. We know multifamily is one of those uses. Could be the only use. Could be other uses added to it. Again, it depends on what the town wants to do. Then there'll be a set of dimensional standards. So lot size, setbacks, open space requirement, building height, building coverage. Those dimensional standards will govern the how big, how high, how wide that can happen on the lot. Then there can be, that's sort of your absolute basic, right? Then there's usually parking requirements. There can be development standards that govern what the site looks like and what the building looks like. There can be design guidelines, which are advisory. And there is a site plan review process, which I'm assuming the town would choose, with most are, and you already have it. So all of those. So it's not just once this is passed, everything can happen. They can only happen according to the rules that are set in place by the town.
It's almost the same thing as in state hospital zoning. It's just the state hospital is not as dense as it would have to be, and we have some age restricting, which you. But the construct of the state hospital zoning is a good example of the type of stuff that would be site plan approval, dimension regulations, but density.
If I can add to that too, a lot of things that would look developable in paper are not in practice. There's a couple parcels that are like, 8 acres, basically open space. You look at a map and you're like, yeah, I can fit 8 houses in there, depending on lot size. And then you actually look at stormwater, what type of soil do you have? And you actually absorb the kind of rainfall that would shift if you have a bigger house, lot coverage. There's so much that goes into wetlands, even topography, how steep is your house? If it's too steep, then you have to fill. If you fill too much, and there's other issues. So a lot of things, I get people coming, it's like, I want to put an extra bedroom in my house. That ends up being a 3-month process with the zoning board for a single bedroom being added. So these are the kind of challenges that you get for small things. So for a large development like this to happen, it goes through so much review, even for a by right use, it goes through so many checks and balances. So, and even if I had a undeveloped land and it's a single family home, I could not realistically fit 10 units where it used to be a single family home at 2 acres because the site can physically and sustainably take that. There's still like that stormwater, public health, traffic around the people parking, and you can't just have the whole site being impervious. There needs to be absorption rates. It gets really complicated. So redevelopment or rezoning, if we were to pass this tomorrow, you would see results from this maybe in 50 years. It takes time. Medfield is mostly built out. Then you will be looking at people buying existing land, buying existing buildings, either tearing them down or reusing them, tearing them down. We have a demo delay bylaw. So many more things get into place. It's a very slow process. Nothing will happen overnight, and everything will happen with the town staying in control, with the planning board, zoning board, different boards, affordable housing trust, overseeing everything. So there will be, it'll be a controlled transition.
In fact, you mentioned an important point with that I did not say earlier, which is the town is changing its zoning laws. It's not changing the Conservation Commission's requirements. The State Wetlands Act stays in place, State Title V stays in place. This is just zoning. So to Maria's point, there are actually a lot of other, we talked about public health and safety. There are a lot of other regulations that go into building. state's building code, for example, all of which absolutely are still in place and still apply. So, you know, if you have sorry.
But they don't have to be considered at the point of time where the new zoning is established. We don't have to ensure that what is going to be zoned in this overlay district has to meet the stormwater requirements or
Correct.
anything.
That
of
is
nature.
correct.
Those
Yeah.
are all downstream.
That's for the
impacts.
applicant's problem.
It has to be developable
Yeah.
land.
And that's what the state's defined.
They have like, you
Yes.
know, can't have a certain amount of land or.
Yeah.
What.
So the
Okay.
state has absolutely defined what they consider to be developable. So we're using their definitions of what's developable to show your compliance with the requirements. And that's where the excluded land comes in. If it's excluded, it's not considered to be developable. It's excluded. It is. That's what we're using. If it's sensitive, it's just signaling to the community that depending on what they do, they may want to have a better look at it, a closer look at it. So, and again, I'm happy to show you the maps as we, better if you crowd around them like that too, but I'm happy to show you what that looks like here. Yeah.
So if there's ledge running through this developable, it's easy to say, parcel that is part of, you know, we're full compliance. Are these new zoning districts still gonna be subject to chapter 48, section 10 for variance?
Yes.
I mean, they can request variance.
Yeah, if
And then it
the,
would be the same requirements.
right.
You know, it's gonna be really complicated for the zoning board is the properties that get in this district that become legally non-conforming and then have all the section 6 applications.
Well, it's an overlay district, so they would
They don't
choose.
opt into it, they're not becoming legally non-conforming.
No, if the base zoning stays in place. So say you put a overlay over a gas station and the gas station is allowed. Probably don't want to do that, but let's just say you did. The gas station is allowed under the current district. Overlay doesn't change that. It just gives them the option to use the overlay for redevelopment, but otherwise it stays as a perfectly conforming gas station as long as it's already conforming.
Right.
It's the advantage, by the way, of using an overlay. It does get messy if a community uses too many overlays, but if you're just trying to solve one problem, basically, it is a good advantage because you're not forcing everybody into non-compliance or a section into non-compliance.
I know of the town having one overlay, Spring Street
Mhm.
overlay district for multi-housing purposes, I believe. Do we have others?
It was never passed. Spring Street is,
Okay,
so we don't technically have any?
all right.
We did.
We did.
That's good. Then.
Yeah.
Where's the-
It was the,
It
it was
must
the,
have been-
it was the affordable housing. That,
Oh.
yeah,
But like, can you have properties that have an overlay and then another overlay?
You can, yeah,
Well, that's a
That's
flood
like,
zone, wetlands,
yeah,
what's the other?
flood.
Yeah, watershed, aquifer, so many,
Sure.
have multiple.
I'm thinking of the work we've done, I do with mixed use. And like thinking of that, you know, targeting that and
I-
thinking the same.
I think
blocks.
I think that theory, that work began before the MBTA communities thing was like a reality, so I think some of, Ted,
Yeah.
some of Ted's work would get incorporated into your community.
So.
MBTA communities bylaw, rather than have a separate.
Yeah.
overlay.
I'd certainly be interested in seeing that. There's something that we can use.
And there's some that you might, some of what he did was applicable to areas where you wouldn't want high density, so you might have other areas where you could leave what you drafted.
Yeah,
And some of the like, what's the district of the big lots? RS.
Yeah, the same, or
No, that's urban. There's an agricultural one and there's,
and yeah,
oh my gosh, I have it here, so.
that would be great. If you're willing to share the work that you've already done, yeah, I'd love to take a look at that.
RE, residential estate,
Yeah,
yeah.
What's the orange?
residential estate, that's largest.
Big lot.
Yeah.
Can you give me like what the deadline is that the state's wanting communities to comply by, or like what's the fine? Like,
no fine. So December 31st, 2024 for you. As an adjacent community, there is no fine Nobody's mentioned a fine, but you do lose access to the grants, which depending on the community, and the AG starts paying a lot of attention to you, so. Yeah.
I know that's a crystal ball question, but in all honesty, and we're not operating to this, but that could 2024 give up to 2025 because people are trying, but they're just not there yet. So it's like, I know we have to, the line in the sand is 2024 right now. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, okay, continue to play this game and then push it another year, push it another 6 months. People, they're trying to get into their town meetings, that can be a challenge.
So I would say, look to the rapid transit communities, to see what they do about that, because of course their deadline is coming up.
Yeah, they're.
Wait, well, rapidly.
being held.
They're being held to it. Yeah. However, let's just say for the moment that the zoning didn't go through in the spring. Let's say you go to a fall town meeting. I know none of us want to do this because it's nice to get the zoning done once, but just use it as an example. You could. Actually, I don't even want to push that. I'd say that your best bet is to get, because the AG has to review it, because HLC has to review it. If you want to be absolutely sure, because you've got huge things riding on it, May is your time. But just so you know, it's already on my calendar. And just put it on the slide. It's actually literally on my calendar, so I know it's coming on. So, yeah.
Another crystal ball question. It may not be fair. I'm coming out of this meeting not really sure whether we're facing a big issue or a little issue.
Right.
If we're going to be talking about a zoning bylaw in May at the town meeting, I'm trying to figure out, and I don't know if you can answer this question, at what point in time will we know enough about what is and isn't possible to where, when we're thinking about the zoning bylaw in May, we have a context for whether it's a big issue or a little issue?
It would have to be fairly soon, because we have to, know where we're going to apply it, right? We have to know what it's going to be. The planning board, select board, you need to have it on your warrant. Planning board's got to have their public hearings, so we're going to be knowing well before then. We're waiting on the state.
We're waiting on the state, so I think our plan has been really that we're gonna basically be on a parallel track. So best case scenario for all of us, I think we put it on the warrant, we get to town meeting and we say, just consult. We've been able to get full compliance with the big hospital project. But we have to be going with two plans because we have to meet the statutory.
We also would need to amend the state hospital zoning, we might need to do the work. So we might have an amendment to the state hospital, even if it does work, and if it doesn't work, it's totally different.
Yeah, so it's like a three-part.
We're following two tracks and we're hoping to not have to lose them in other areas. This would be my opinion.
So what makes me uncomfortable about that is plan A is the state hospital covers some significant chunk of the requirement, and we have a little issue. But if we can't get that, we also have plan B, which will be up for a vote in May, which means we've figured out plan B. And that sounds, if that's the big issue one, I'm skeptical. I'm not sure how we do a parallel track, because plan A, and because of a whole bunch of other issues, is its own big issue. Trying to come up with a hypothetical plan B that we will just default to if somebody says no. I see that being problematic. And I understand it's gonna be awkward.
Assume for a second that the state hospital doesn't work, because it's easier if it does and it does work. But for the plan, for everyone to select a 50-acre assemblage of land, for the planning board to draft a bylaw and do the outreach necessary to get people to say yes, which is not been 100% in the past. I think May is wildly unrealistic.
That's my point.
Can we do a special town meeting in the fall?
You can. I think what Emily was saying is if you do it in the fall and it goes to the Attorney General who doesn't approve it and HLC says no, then we run the risk of falling out of compliance and not being eligible for aspects.
I think as long as it's in front of them, you're considered within compliance.
That would make
Your
sense.
problem is going to be if they say no.
Right.
That's the part that I'm worried about. If you turn it in and the AG is still reviewing it as of December 31st, HLC is reviewing it as of December 31st. My understanding is you're still in compliance. That's what I've heard.
Because the next round of master's funding will be next fall.
Exactly. So this is, you know,
Part of what concerns me, I mean, some of your comments have been sort of assuming, well, communities want to do this thing that the state is forcing them to do. And I'm saying we already embraced the 40B, and if the state hospital project goes through, we're not 10% compliant with 40B. We're 17 or so percent compliant with 40B.
yeah.
That's by itself 700 units.
Mhm.
So when we sit there and say, and now we want you another 50 acres, like this is a fundamental definition of the town that we're dealing with. I appreciate the state can sue us, and I appreciate the state can dangle funds that they won't give us. I'm sitting there saying, if they say no, I begin to question the wisdom of the entire, don't go. I begin to, the record, I begin to question the wisdom of us putting in 334 40B compliant, 25% 40B compliant units at the state hospital to get to 17% of affordable housing at the time that the state potentially is putting us into a box of having to zone things that we don't want zoned the way that it has to be zoned to comply with the law. And if the threat is, well, then we won't give you the MassWorks funding, then okay, you're destroying, you're already making this argument, so I'm not actually, I'm not going so far. Well, but I mean, but somewhere somebody should count units.
Yeah.
And that's, and I'm not even arguing that point, I'm trying to figure out the sequencing of votes.
Yes.
And I think Sarah's right, trying to have those two votes ready in May is problematic. And if we have to go that route, I think the fall is gonna be a real nasty planning period. It's
I will give you some relief, which is part of my job, if I remember correctly, is to help draft that zoning.
Right,
So it's
yeah.
not all on your
No,
shoulders.
but.
Yeah, but you have to have the
It's
public
solid.
hearings, we have to have a back and forth, absolutely, it takes time.
So what is your timetable then, given all that for May meeting?
Right, exactly. So, I had the very highest of, so we're going to have the public meeting in December
We'll have a
14th.
slide.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, I could have done it.
That's fine. I think this is
I
fine.
don't think I did the full detail for this one because it was getting too much. So community input on December 14th. I'll be working on the draft bylaw to start off with. Help better if we had a geographic area. So we need to talk about that, Maria, just saying, put a note down. On how we want to do that. Community input into the bylaw. And that's probably going to be the general fair. I mean, obviously I can start with the sample bylaw. Anything you all have already done, we can start putting those pieces together, rough out what it looks like, have a conversation with the community on December 14th. Then we will be doing, I hadn't talked to you yet about your process for when you have the warrant close, when we need to get things in. So we need to rough that in, and then I back off from that. So
Mid-January, that's when we have to have the gist of it done, and it goes out to print. I think last time it was the week before town meeting, but that's kind of, I would rather have it ready before.
yeah, so we have some technical issues to
Yes.
discuss, like
Yeah.
whether or not you allow placeholders in the warrant, how close to printing, do you do handouts at town meeting, all of the bad practices that all of the bad practice that every community does, especially for zoning. So that's just how zoning works sometimes. So yeah, we'll firm up the schedule. We'll talk to you all to get a sense of your schedule, because I'm sure this isn't the only thing on your plate. We'll also talk to you, the select board, about your schedule and, you know, when and how you want updates on that. But the idea is to get the community input and then really put the language together so we can move into the hearing processes as soon as possible. So
On the compliance issue, the lawyer in me keeps looking at the guidelines and the
of course,
statute.
yes,
But the definition on determination of compliance needs a determination by EOHLC as to whether the community has a multifamily zoning district that complies with the requirements of 3A. A determination of compliance may be determination of interim compliance.
yes, Yeah,
So,
We have that now.
yeah. Yeah, you've met the first step of filing your action plan, so
but I mean,
you are,
arguably,
yeah.
I guess we have to look at interim compliance.
And that could be your interim compliance, but you have to have another town meeting to fix X. It could
Would be
be,
if it's not total compliance by December
exactly,
31st,
yeah.
doesn't look to be an absolute problem.
So what we need to do, obviously, is, as we know our timeline, if there's any shift to that timeline, then talk to HLC about the implications of that from their perspective. So well before town meeting has to make a decision, that would actually not create a possibility of a timeline problem for an actuality. So, yes.
What happens if we have the article
Mhm.
and it gets voted down? Are we in compliance? Because we did everything the state
Yeah.
said?
So if you don't have the zoning, you are not in compliance.
We asked them this a couple weeks ago, and they said no.
Yeah.
It was very.
So basically, it's the voters that are being held hostage here.
It is.
You either vote for it or you're not in compliance.
It is your town meeting that has to vote for it, yes. But as with any,
That
by the way,
basically
as with
says the
any
vote is
zoning.
meaningless because the state dictating this.
Well, they're dictating that you have to have the zoning district or not, and that it has to meet certain requirements. They're not dictating, especially in your case, because you're adjacent, they're not dictating where, they're not dictating the parameters within it beyond those that demonstrate compliance.
Yes.
That's why I like local government.
And we do have that, like, Emily mentioned, a December 14th info session.
Yes.
For the public specifically. We're going to be, advertising in the newspaper. I'm going to be posting flyers in town hall, the rec center, the center, the library, our website. I'm gonna be mentioning at every public meeting again, like here, yeah, this is the plug. We have the website. So my goal is to have 1 or 2 public workshops, with Emily, and then through the planning board, I want to keep updating this, and we are required to have, I believe, at least 2 meetings, at least 2 public hearings for the planning board before this. So there'll be at least 4 opportunities for the public to participate and get informed, as long as, along with my bi-weekly updates through every board I can get a platform on. So I hope, we can get the word out, people can get involved early as we can make it. I know this is a bit of a tight deadline, but the state has imposed a bit of a tight deadline, so we're gonna try to make the best of it. And if you want to help spread the word, please do. I'll send out all the materials I have. Oh, thank you, Eileen. So we have a Q&A.
Okay.
Bill Massaro says, my understanding of the MSH land disposition agreement is projected sale March 2024. It also includes options for extensions if town-owned land is excluded. That is the fallback if the transaction is extended before December 2024.
You can override this one because you are in the active process of disposing of this land for housing. You can put an override in the model. So we can model it for compliance.
Will the map you mentioned up there, will that be on the website so citizens can kind of see what
Yeah,
we
we
are
can put it
looking?
on
I mean,
there.
that right there, I think will draw attention.
Yeah.
You're gonna do people that are really near that spot that we're gonna want to learn what can happen in their backyard.
Yeah. We should probably, I should probably modify it and resend it just to let them know that those are test districts. They're not actual districts that
Yes.
anybody has decided on. So let me put that caveat on it and then, yeah, we can put it on. I don't want anybody saying, oh my God, they've already decided. So, you know.
Emily, are there 2 maps? One that includes the state hospital approved and another picture without, or?
This is just the map that shows the land areas. So I'm gonna hold it up and then you can come up and have a look at it. So it is your entire town. The dark green is excluded land. The slightly lighter green is the excluded land with the sensitive land overlaid on top of it. The blue is your sensitive land. Remember that can still be modeled. State hospital up here. And we looked just for test purposes as at these 2 yellow areas here. So you can have a look at that.
That would be the downtown and a tiny, I think 5-acre district along Route 109.
Yes, yeah.
As tax districts again, because there are areas that have a little less residential.
And as test districts, how big are You just said 5 acres was one.
One's a
Wait.
little over 5. The other one
Wait.
is,
They don't have to
45
get
is for
50.
downtown.
yeah, exactly.
45 for downtown, 5 for the other.
Okay.
The other's right there.
So
Yeah.
like the Loveland property, I think we talked about this in years ago, when I lived with Sarah, is, like that property at some point potentially could change hands. So that's something in theory, we could do an overlay on that, even though it's not for sale today,
Mhm.
that could.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's for everyone, yeah.
We could overlay Shaw's, overlay
You could,
over Shaw's, the other center next to it, the offices, the commercial offices right behind it. I don't know how large that is. What's that look like?
offices, some communities, my understanding is that some communities are looking at them as an office market.
Seventh wave brewery and all that is that,
The industrial extensive.
so you can't do that?
We have a separate workshop December 4th to decide the destiny of the industrial extensive district. So that could absolutely be something we discuss.
Well, you'll leave your own circles around things like the park, or 5-acre parcels around these highly developed, therefore economically unlikely to be developed as multifamily. Shaw's Plaza, Montrose School, maybe some of the downtown.
Yeah, we can look at a strategy that looks at those.
We have a long-term lease, a 99-year lease on town land. Does that qualify as privately owned then? If we're going to do the Kingsbury Club site.
I don't know the answer to that, actually. I'm not sure that it does.
I could get devious and I could
Yeah, you're
take
right.
50 acres of town land and deed it to Gus. And he's never gonna do anything with it, and then we would come to that site.
I'll fold it into the.
No, unfortunately, for that creative strategy, I believe it has to be, that's owned by the town unless it is in active use or about to be active use for housing.
So the town couldn't dispose of it,
Yes,
but, there'd be a contract that says that the recipient can't do anything with it, but I'm assuming this is.
now, see, you have just gotten to part of the original problem with the state hospital, which is the town is disposing of the land. In theory, it is zoned for 750 units, right? It's all about zoning, but you have an LDA that says, hey, you can't build the full amount. You can build less than the full amount. That is the problem. So to replicate that, if you disposed of your 50 acres to Gus with an agreement that said, by the way,
This is
please don't golf this
hypothetical
for
for
me.
anybody that's
This
watching.
is hypothetical. You are just simply replicating that exact same problem. So it's a good illustrative for anybody who's watching, illustrative example of why that doesn't work. So.
Everybody's getting too creative, so I think we're done.
Thank you, Christine. I'm happy to talk about the map if people want to come up, but I think the recorded part of the.
Yes, we do need to close the public
Oh.
meeting component from the planning board and the select board.
Well, but
votes to adjourn.
we wanna,
They want to keep
we
going.
wanna keep talking.
They can keep talking.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Okay.
A couple questions after that.
As long
Yeah, I
as the
can
board
come
doesn't
over.
leave the room before we vote.
No, we didn't.
What's our next commitment?
Motion, we have full harmony?
What's our next commitment as a group?
December 14th.
That's it?
For this, yes.
Is it?
And so Affordable Housing Trust really won't be dealing with this at all. It's on the planning board.
It's on, they proposed the planning bylaw page, yeah. Yeah, this is just so, if you know any feedback, that's why. So I feel like when I walk after.
Sitting, it kills me.
No, I think that will mostly fall on planning board, but it'll, obviously I can let you know, so if you want to participate in that,
Or you could-
Maria did
I
the,
could report.
sorry to interrupt, I just want to make sure the, meeting is.
Yeah, oh, let me, yes?
You're still doing a really good job.
Thank you.
And I think people should tell you that.
Thank you, I really appreciate that.
No, but I think somebody.
Oh, I'm sorry.